Hey, this is Coach T. This is week 18 of my C Sharp year-long dev diary or video diary, whatever you want to call it, in which I'm cataloging my progress in working with and trying to learn a lot about C Sharp. I don't expect to master it after 52 weeks, but definitely become at least conversant and maybe even proficient with it. So, last week, just to recap, I had talked about really crystallizing my decision to pursue Unity as a means of making everything that I'm learning concrete and learning a library and having fun with what I'm working on. And then also, if after 3 months, I was going to switch to ASP.NET. That is still the viable path. And depending on where you are, I'm either recording this late or I'm recording this early, which is why I'm dressed like this, working dad. Um, I finished the benchmarks required to transition over to doing Unity full time. So basically, I said I had a bunch of open projects that I needed to work through in the Udemy course with Christina's course, C Sharp Masterclass for 2024. I also had chapters that were not finished yet in the R.B. Whitaker book, and I had some projects that I needed to finish for those. They're all done. I worked my tail off this week, which is why this devilishly handsome gentleman is on the screen here, Kronk. It's all coming together, right? So I actually really started to enjoy working with LINQ this week. The syntax started to click. I learned about select. I learned about the where. I learned about order and order by and descending and then by. And I learned about averaging. And really, I learned to use the squeal skills in C Sharp. And once the rust came off those querying skills that I worked on through January and February of this past year, I was like, oh, okay, all right, this is a very tangible library. It's not connected to a UI. It's not enough to do what I want to do for work, but the light started turning on in there, and I actually found ways to use it in work. So I had a couple things I'm going to show off, or actually I can't show off this one because it's on my work computer, but basically I needed a combination of a stopwatch that would give me date times and subtract two of them basically, and I also needed a way to tally behaviors. So every time that I had to turn a stopwatch on, I wanted a record that the stopwatch was turned on and the student that it was attached to, and then when I was done with an observation period, I wanted to be able to save it and export it so that I had a record, like an artifact of that particular day. I built that and I ran it at work and I used it for one of the days where I was observing. So all it does is it sits on in the console on my work laptop, and when I turn it on, I type the name of the student that I'm observing, just a first name. We're protecting personal identifying information here. And then every time I hit the spacebar, it either starts or stops a running calculator or a running stopwatch. If it starts it, that means that the kid is distracted, he's off topic, and then if I hit spacebar again, it stops it and it logs. That goes in as a struct, storing the value of the duration of time that the individual was distracted. And then when I'm all done, I can type quit, and it saves it to a JSON and saves it, exports it, and I have a record of the number of times and also the duration of distractions that kid had. And then I was able to turn around and use that in a conversation with a teacher and say, all right, so this kid was distracted, 23 times and it cost 12 minutes or whatever it was. I got the idea from earlier in the week where I was doing that, and I wrote it out as a LINQ query. And I wanted to see, like, okay, can I use LINQ in my day-to-day practice as an instructional coach? And I did. I actually, as I was tallying, instead of just tallying like caveman tallies, I had a query that I pre-wrote, and then I ran the query, for lack of a better thing, on a Chromebook. I ran it through Google Gemini, and I just said, what would this LINQ query turn out? And it spit out the record that I needed because of the way I had pre-formatted it. And then I was like, okay. I went down to my office and I spent like 30 minutes putting together this really rudimentary console app. That was really funny. Maybe you can tell by the energy in my voice. I had a real blast with that particular activity, and it was a really neat way to see LINQ connect right away. And then I started looking at, okay, so can I pull information from a CSV into LINQ? Because I can export stuff from a CSV, for example, reports from our programs to CSVs. So I need to build my proficiency up at some point in the near future, not now, because I'm transitioning to Unity, but now I know it's possible. Pull information in from a CSV, parse it with LINQ, and then give us something tangible to work with. Whether it's the average growth rate in different classes on assessments or on an individual kid, seeing how I can do that with a select query and saving a lot of coding that I would otherwise have to use, like nested for loops, to get through, was invigorating, which is a weird thing to say, but it's the truth. So that was really cool. But I finished a couple things. I went back and I finished an outstanding app for Christina that I hadn't finished for that course. I actually watched my way through it. I was more curious to see how she did it than to build it myself. I decided the productive struggle wasn't really productive in this case. Rather, I wanted to see the theory behind the architecture, and I ended up using that later in the week to build my own app. So I feel like that was a very valid use of my time. And then I also went and I finished the LINQ stuff. I flew through the LINQ stuff. Once I started paying attention to it and I wasn't going 6 different directions at once, and it really started to sink in, all of the SQL stuff started to come back to the surface, and then I was off to the races. It took me a little bit to get the syntax down, but once I started to understand the key differences between like what a select lambda is doing versus a where lambda, and how one is filtering for a new collection and the other is transforming into a new collection, then the syntax started to click, and it was off to the races because I started to learn how to chain them and to modify to get the exact type of analytical result that I was looking for. Long way to go, but a really solid start. Really enjoyed it. She has a whole course on LINQ that I'm seriously considering picking up maybe this summer, just so I could learn more about it. So I worked on LINQ. I finished the LINQ chapter. I finished the Whitaker chapter on generics. I don't totally get them. But I am starting to plan with generics in mind, using like a list of T, or using. I wrote a couple functions that use generics but then return a specific result. I don't know if that's the intended result or the intended use of the generics, but it worked for me. It's still a little loosey-goosey, but I think that's one of those things that's outside my purview right now. And as I get better with C# through Unity and through continued exposure, I think I might start to pick it up. But whatever, I can't learn everything all at once. The other thing that I did, maybe a little bit naughty, was I've been waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm beginning to transition my schedule to work out in the mornings, because mental fitness is as important as physical fitness. So I've been studying in the mornings while my brain adjusts, so that I can start working out in the mornings and then have my evenings more free with more time for the girls in the afternoon. So I've had this like hour and a half long period in the morning where I'm reading or preparing or reflecting. So I've turned it into part of it as a study chunk now, and I started working through her section on strings and how strings work under the hood, and to really learn more about that string type. It's pretty interesting. I don't think I'm going to finish that section right now, but I was more intrigued by what's really going on under the hood when it comes to like Unicode, the UTF-16 that encodes the characters in C#, and then how car connects to string and how strings are reference types. It's a little bit abstract, but I found it really interesting to get a look at what's going on underneath my script. She has a section on numbers as well, and I think a section on enumerables. So I'm gonna work through the whole course. At this point, I'm sitting at like 37% of the course complete. There's chunks that I still need to learn more about, but I'm pretty confident about most of that material. Even if I can't architect it as well as she does, anywhere near as well as she does, I can make it work. I'm even starting to be able to serialize to and from text, to and from JSON on my own. There's a couple steps that I had to iron out when I built that little app, and then some light bulbs went on where I was like, okay. Now I understand why I need to serialize like JSON, serialize it to a string before I try to export it. I was confusing the order of operations there. So productive, very productive week when it comes to learning C#. very fun week. There wasn't a day where I felt, up until the very end, working through some of the backwork stuff that I had just skipped before, forgotten about it. That felt completionist. It felt kind of sloggy, and it wasn't my best effort. But really, up until that particular night, I was having a blast. And the work that I did this morning before I went to work was also, it was rewarding. That's the nice thing. For a little while there, I was starting to feel like, what am I doing? But now I have this purpose. So yeah. So Crunk's here in the background. I'm going to show you what I did in Unity. So I like to talk about my resources as well, because learning is complicated. So I decided, after some reflection, to pick up a copy of Unity in Action. And right now I've got a Kindle book, and I'm waiting on the print one to come. But I was able to secure a digital copy of this. So I've been reading the beginning, pretty cool stuff in the beginning, like outlining the history of Unity, what it was for, who it was for, what distinguishes it, stuff that I didn't know. And it kind of put some design choices that I've wondered about into context. The other one that I had looked at was this book, this one. So, all right, thanks, buddy. I've looked at this book a whole bunch, and the biggest thing that kept me away from it was, oh my gosh, was that there are a lot of complaints about typos in the coding, and he has a whole series. You can see some of them here. There's like 6 books maybe, but I don't know. Given how big they are, how thick they are, I don't know how much is different from book to book to book. So I was having a hard time figuring out where to break in, because I'm not a Foundations level C# programmer, and I'm not really a Foundations Unity developer either. Like, I do kind of know my way around the interface just from goofing around with it over the last 2 years. So I was like, am I between these two? And then I was kind of looking at his chapter list. Ultimately, I decided that this one made more sense for me. It's really not oriented around building C#, or about learning C#. So this is one of the selling lines. It's for programmers who know any object-oriented programming language. I know Python and I know C#. And he talks about that. Like, this is a book for somebody who knows C#. I'm not going to explain largely what the code does. You're kind of expected to keep up with that. And I appreciate that. So it's very focused. And so far, I'm 2 chapters in. I have had no issues following what the code does, except in one spot where he was talking about Euler angles and quaternions. And I know roughly what both of those are. I don't totally know what distinguishes them. So the methods that we're using are a little bit alien to me. But that's just a matter of learning. So as I read through this book, I'm documenting 52 weeks here. I am going to, I'll do a review of it, just like I will for the Whitaker book and the Christina course. And I probably learned out Microsoft too. I have some things to share about that experience as somebody coming to C# largely out of the cold. So yeah, here's the 3 parts of the book. So getting to know Unity, I thought that was really interesting. Building a demo that puts you in game space. I'm going to show my work on that here in a second. And then adding enemies and projectiles to the 3D game. You're making a first-person shooter. So far, I'm just exploring a gray boxed area. But I have some ideas for how I might want to do this differently. And that's kind of down here, creating a third-person 3D game. I'm going to just work through it. I'm not in a rush. Ultimately, I think I want to build some sort of twin-stick game. I just think they're fun. But yeah, I just felt like this book was more respectful of my time when I was doing the initial research. And it's got strong reviews from both Unity users and C# programmers transitioning over. So I'm looking forward to having the physical copy in my hands, though. The Kindle copy has this bad habit of splitting the coding sections, and I just have a hard time, like, flipping around. What on earth? Okay. That must be where the sample ends. That really threw me off. It's late here. Yeah, so there's Unity in action. And so what I've done is this is my, whoops, let's select my player capsule. This is my guy. This is my player bro. The camera sees right through him, so I don't know where the camera should really be in respect to him. I haven't figured that out. Very simple. But the goal is to create a player capsule that has a script on it over here. It's got a mouse look script, and it's got an FPS movement script, which I'm going to try to open those. And I'm using a character controller rather than a rigid body right now. I know more or less what that is, but I don't totally know how to use both of them. So I'll show you the script and then I'll play the game and just show you it's not that complicated as far as the scripts go. But this is again, it's a learning log for me for the future. So yeah, so here's the mouse look. So what we do is we set an enum, and that allows us to have a configurable field. Where did you go? Right here. So I can say, do I want to look left and right? Do I want to look up and down? Or do I want to look both? And then I set some basic beginning characteristics. And then if there's a rigid body, we're freezing it. There's not one, though. So it doesn't matter. This really doesn't even need to be there. And then these should be extrapolated out into functions. Mouse X movement, mouse Y, whatever. But it's fine in the update loop at the moment. Basically, if the selected axes, I'm just going to collapse these because they don't matter. If the selected axis is mouse X and Y, then the vertical rotation subtracts from whatever the product of the current get axis and sensitivity vert is. So that allows the mouse looking to feel natural. If I invert this, looking around feels inverted, it's goofy and uncomfortable. And then after that, we clamp it. This is kind of cool. I wish this was just basically in C#. Maybe it is, and I just don't know better. But the clamp keeps it between two specified angles. So I spent a good long while yesterday playing with the two specified angles, the minimum and the maximum vert, to figure out what felt comfortable for a mouse-looking first-person experience. And I thought that was neat. I was actually like designing an experience. And then I've got the delta, which is the difference between something. So for the float delta is I'm getting the axis on this way, the x-axis, and I'm multiplying that times a preset sensitivity feature, which can be calculated out or adjusted by the user eventually. And then I am changing the transform of the local Euler angle. That's the thing I don't understand. To create a new vector 3 with the vertical rotation from the math clamp and the horizontal rotation here, and then nothing on the z-axis. So up and down, and then side to side. So that's it for mouse look, and it's really not that complicated. This could be simplified, and I'm sure he will shortly. The other thing is for FPS movement. So move speed is 6 units, I think, per frame. I don't exactly know what 6 translates to be honest. And then it's very simple. So in the update loop, we have delta X is the input get axis horizontal, so A and D, and then delta Z is W and S, and you just multiply those times move speed. And really this should be times time dot delta time, I think. Because that should smooth out inconsistencies. And then you just tell the transform to translate. However, I ran into a big issue here, and this is where having the physical book would have made my life a little bit easier, because it was just hard to leaf back and forth in the Kindle and see where I have and haven't been. If I play this, you can see looking around, feels good. It's pretty solid. All right, I got green and red lights, and I am not moving. Why am I not moving? It could be because, oops. Sorry. Could be because my move speed is way too slow. So what if we turn the move speed to 20? Oh, okay, there we go. Now we're moving. So right away you can see the issue. I can go through the floor, and that's not ideal. I can go through the walls. So the issue here is that I am using the transform. I'm translating the transform, not the character controller. And I spent a long time trying to figure out what I was doing wrong because his code had mentioned a rigid body, but when I had a rigid body on here, it made everything go wacky. I was falling through the floor. It was a mess. So basically, the reality is I was 2 page flips from us dealing with this problem, and I just couldn't tell because of the way the Kindle file is set up. And I just don't like reading technical text on Kindle unless I have to. So that was a bummer. But yeah, so we're moving. I'm having a good time with this. It's very, very simple, but it's also very, very early days. And you can see it's moving nicely. It's smooth. I actually think mine is smoother than his because of the way he set up his the angles on his test thing. I just felt like it was really jagged when you're moving slow. Mine does not. Might be because I have the get axis rather than get axis raw. I'm not sure. So I'm learning a little bit. I got, obviously a long way to go. This a game does not make, but it does make for a couple of really interesting evenings of self-study. And that's what this is about. This is about the journey over 52 weeks to learn C# and to learn to do cool stuff with it. So, hello, son. So if you like that kind of thing, I guess we just learned that this needs to be turned maybe to 12. If you like this kind of thing, check back next week for week 19. We are quickly approaching the halfway point for the log. But I'm transitioning into full-time Unity study where my evenings are going to be split either between working on book stuff for the company that I mentioned last week, where we do creative work on tabletop RPGs, and just learning Unity and having fun with C#. So that's it. I'm Coach T, and there should be a bevy of new videos this week. I think the Affinity Publisher 2 workshop starts this week. If you like that, subscribe. Otherwise, thanks for sticking around. If you also learned Unity or you're learning Unity, drop me a comment and tell me what you're working on. Peace.